Good morning. This is Introduction to Algebra for Thursday, April the 9th. I hope you had a good day last night. I hope you watched Pastor Wilkerson for church, or Brother Gomez if you're in Spanish church. I hope you went to church last night. And I'm going to ask that you look at Lesson 106. Lesson 106, page 296. Now, today we're going to talk about negative root numbers and negative exponents. Now, just as a little way of review, let's look over here at this. I have 2 squared. 2 squared simply means 2 times 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. So 2 squared equals 4. Pretty simple. Then we have here negative 2 squared. Negative 2 squared means negative 2 times negative 2. And we know that a negative number times a negative number gives us a positive answer. So negative 2 times negative 2 is going to be a positive 4. Okay, now as a way of review, let's look at this one. What is the square root of 4? What times itself gives us the answer of 4? Well, the square root of 4 is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. What about if I have a negative square root? What we're going to do here is we find our square root, and then we give the opposite of that. So the square root of 4 is 2. The opposite of that would be a negative 2. Let's look at the next one. What is the third root of negative 8? Well, what times itself 3 times will give us negative 8? Well, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Now, you cannot have a negative root. This answer cannot be a negative number if this third was like a square or a 4 or a 6. Why? Because you would be multiplying that in sets of 2. Anytime this number is even, the answer has to be even, okay? Now, what's the third root of 27? Well, 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 times 3 is 27, so the third root is 27. Now, all of that was review, and hopefully it was all very easy for you. Let's look at this. I wrote the fraction 2/3. If I asked you, what is the reciprocal of 2/3, you would say it was 3/2. Because the word reciprocal simply means we take it and we flip it upside down. We do that all the time in equations. When it says to multiply a fraction in an equation, we simply divide because we're doing the opposite. How do you divide a fraction? You use the reciprocal. Now, let's look at this. We have 4 squared. Okay, we have a base number of 4. We have our exponent of 2, and it's a positive 2. So we say 4 times 4 is 16. Here we have 4 times a negative 2. I can't do that. I cannot have a negative exponent and solve that. How do I do that? Okay, I'm simply going to use the reciprocal. Now, every whole number is over the number 1. So this is technically, if I wanted to put it under here, I could put a 100. Because it's 4/1, and the 4 is at a negative second power, okay? If I want to write the reciprocal of 4, I'm going to write 1/4, because I'm taking this 1 and a 4, and I'm flipping it. Okay, so I have 1/4. This 2, this negative 2 has to stay with the 4, okay? It has to stay on the same, has to go with it. But the thing is, when I use a reciprocal, I get rid of the negative. It becomes a positive 2. I cannot solve 4 to the negative second power in an equation, okay? I have to get rid of this negative power. In order to do that, I use the reciprocal, okay? I take the fraction, 4/1, and I flip it upside down. Now I have 1/4. My 2 goes with my 4, but when I move it from the top of my fraction to the bottom, when I use the reciprocal, it becomes a positive 2. Now, if it was on the bottom and I flipped it to the top, it would still be a positive number. So anytime I use the reciprocal, okay? So here, I have 2 to the negative 4th power. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the reciprocal of this. I'm going to write 1 over 2, okay? And instead of having a negative 4, it's going to be a positive 4. Now, I can solve these two problems. I can say this is 1. Well, 4 squared is 16. So this 4 to the negative 2nd is going to be 1/16. Okay? 2 to the negative 4th. What did I do? I used the reciprocal, 1 over 2. I changed my negative 4 to a positive 4. And now I can solve it. Keeping my 1. And I say 2 times 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. Times 2 is 16. So the answer again is 1/16. They're not all 1/16. They just happen to be. Okay, we have 7 to the negative 2nd power. First, use the reciprocal is 1 over 7. The negative 2 becomes a positive 2. And if I want to solve this, it becomes 1/49. Let's look at this next problem I have. Okay? Oh, some of these kind of ran into it, so I'm going to erase them. There we go. Okay? We have 4 to the negative 3rd. Write that on your paper. 4 to the negative 3rd. Okay? What's the first thing you need to do? Write the reciprocal. So the reciprocal is 1/4. You have a negative 3rd power, but when you use the reciprocal, it becomes a positive 3. Okay? Now to solve that, I simply keep my numerator, because it's a 1, and solve my power. 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 4 is 64. Look at your next one. Do it all on your own. It is 3 to a negative 2nd power. What are you going to do? Okay, hopefully you said, first I use a reciprocal and I put 1 over 3. Then I change the sign of my exponent from a negative 2 to a positive 2. And then you solved your problem. 1 over 3 squared becomes 1/9. Okay? Now, if you remember last week, I told you anytime we have a sign that's inside the parentheses, that sign is protected. In other words, it moves with its number and it doesn't change until we solve the equation. Today, that's going to become very important. And numbers inside the parentheses are protected. Okay? So, let's look at our number. We have 1 over a negative 2 to a negative 4th power. Again, we cannot have a negative power. So I have to do what? Use the reciprocal. Okay, so the reciprocal of this is the negative 2 has to go on the top, right? Because this negative sign is inside the parentheses, it's protected, we don't change it. Okay, so it's negative 2, and my negative 4 becomes a positive 4 over 1. Now, solve this. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Now, really what I say is 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. The question is it a positive 16 or a negative 16? Well, remember, when you're multiplying negative numbers, if you have 2 negative numbers, your answer is positive. If you have 1 negative and 1 positive, the answer is negative. What do you do when you have a whole bunch? Well, you say, how many negatives do I have? Well, I have 4 negatives. And since that's an even number, my answer is positive. So my answer is 16. Look at this one. This one's a little different than the one above. Why? Well, because there's a negative sign on the outside of my expression, and it's not in parentheses, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore it, okay? I'm just simply going to put my hand over it, and I'm going to deal with my expression, okay? So I have 1 over -3 to the -2nd power. So let's deal with that first, and then we'll figure out what to do with this sign. So cover that up so it doesn't confuse you. How are you going to solve this? Use the reciprocal because I have a negative exponent. So I'm going to say -3, changing my -2 to a +2. Now I did not change the -3 because it's what? Inside parentheses. That sign is protected. Now the 1 goes to the bottom, okay? And I'm going to say -3 times -3 is a +6. So I'm going to bring my 6 over. Now I go back and say I have this negative sign. It needs to come over and join my answer. So my answer is -6. Let's look at the top. I have a -1 over -5 to the -2nd power. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore this. I'm going to ignore that sign. I'm going to say 1 over a -5th to a -2nd is, well, the 1 goes on the bottom. At the top, I put -5. But what do I do to this -2 exponent? Becomes a +2. Okay? Now I'm going to solve this. I'm going to say -5 squared. That literally means -5 times -5, and that is 25, a +25. But I have this negative sign. I got to bring it over. So, okay? Now I have 1 over 2 to the -4th. Okay? What are we going to do? Use the reciprocal. So it's 2 to the 4th power over 1. And if I want to solve it all the way out, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. There's no negative signs here, so 16 is my final answer. Okay? Remember, this, when you take your negative exponent, if you have a negative exponent, you have to use a reciprocal. That means you have to flip it upside down. Okay? When you flip a negative exponent, it becomes positive. Now, the only sign you have to worry about are the ones inside the brackets, the parentheses. That is protected. Do not change that. Move that sign with its number if it needs to be moved. Okay? Then you have a negative number that you're squaring or cubing or to the 4th power or whatever. This negative sign that is not protected right here, we don't use it again until we get over here to after we're trying to solve what this is, and it makes it a negative number. Today, your homework is going to be all online. It's not from your book. It's all online. I want you to be very careful as you're doing it. Pay close attention. I am going to leave the homework guide on for you so that you can see if you're doing them correctly or not, and that'll help you as you're practicing this, okay? Make sure you take your quiz. The quiz is not about this. It's just a regular daily review quiz. And then we will do a few more of these tomorrow, and we'll get into the lesson on our book. But again, today's homework is not from your book. It's just online, okay? So there's nothing to do from the actual book today, all right? Have a good day.